Congratulations, true crime addicts. We've survived another week. It is Friday, May 10th, 2024. This week, everything you need to know about the Mica Miller case. Police in Florida kill a guy who was FaceTiming his girlfriend. And Drake is totally not a creep, guys. Completely, totally, absolutely not a creep. All this and more. Stay tuned.
Yes. Super excited. We are all pumped to have James Renner.
James Renner on.
That James Renner has zeroed in on.
James Renner once again drops a bombshell.
Investigative journalist, reporter James Renner, who's been on the podcast, longtime friend of mine.
And welcome back to True Crime This Week with me, your host, James Renner. Here's the James Renner bell. Hey, some good news at the top of the show before we get into the craziest, wackiest, most disturbing episode of True Crime This Week. There's some really weird cases this week, guys. But first, I want to thank FeedSpot. FeedSpot is a website. You can go there. They talk about podcasts and just a little bit of everything. Anyways, this podcast, True Crime This Week, was named as one of the top 80 true crime podcasts in the world, in the entire world. Yes, we're on this list. It's an honor. I want to thank the Academy and everybody else. But go check it out. You can see the full list on podcasts.feedspot.com. Also, CrimeCon is coming up in just a couple weeks. If you haven't grabbed your tickets yet, and you want to, go ahead and use my code RENNER, R-E-N-N-E-R, on their website for a sweet discount on tickets. And hopefully I'll see you there in Nashville. And as always, I want to thank my good buddy Walter for manning the camera. Walter's just back from LA where he was recording a diss track about Kermit the Frog. They've got this thing going. I don't know, those crazy guys. But anyways, thanks for being here, Walter. You know, let's get right to this. If you follow true crime, you know what this week's top story is. A couple times every year, internet sleuths go fucking crazy over a story, and they start pointing fingers at uncharged suspects and doxing people online. It's the worst of the worst, and sometimes the best of the best in there too. These stories usually involve attractive young women harmed by their boyfriends or husbands. Think Gabby Petito. This week, the true crime world became obsessed with a woman named Mica Miller. Now, let's talk about how all this started and where the story stands today. Maybe you've heard about Mica Miller, maybe you don't know the latest details. I'm giving it to you. If you haven't heard about it, let's start at the beginning. Mica Miller was a 30-year-old woman who was married to a guy named John Paul, who is the pastor at a place called Solid Rock Church, which is near Myrtle Beach. Now, on April 27th, Mica was found dead at Lumber River State Park, which is just across the border in North Carolina. The next day, the day after she was found dead, John Paul goes about his business as usual, has a little church service. Then at the end of the service, he announces that his wife has committed suicide. You might have wanted to lead with that, I imagine. This is when the social media milieu, if you will, gets involved. TikTokers are posting the sermon and photos of Mica on the app. Many people begin to suggest that Mica's death might, in fact, be murder. This quickly leads to the church announcing that John Paul was released from his duties during the ongoing investigation, and then the church's website shuts down. I don't know if they were just overloaded with people clicking on it and it just crumbled, or if they legitimately just decided, okay, we're done here, we can't recover from this, shut it down, Lemon. And for a minute there, it looked like the online sleuths might be onto something. Details began to emerge in the days after Mica's death that John Paul was allegedly cheating on Mica and that He'd met Mica herself when she was just 10 years old and had groomed her before marrying her when she became an adult. Now, according to the Sun News, Mica's sister, Sierra Francis, filed paperwork following Mica's death in which she asked to be appointed special administrator of her estate. Now, in these filings is an affidavit that suggested Mica's death was suspicious and that Mica had sought a restraining order against John Paul. Francis also stated that, quote, I know my sister to have expressed abuse and violence against her by her husband to others, including family members and members of the church. She also stated that Mica said, quote, if I end up with a bullet in my head, it was not by me, it was John Paul, end quote. Mica had filed for divorce, for separation, that is, from John Paul on April 15th. Now, he wasn't served, though. He wasn't served the divorce papers until just 2 days before her death. Sounds very suspicious, right? Every new detail brought new disturbing evidence about Mica and John Paul's relationship. For instance, on March 11th, Mica's tires were slashed. Later that same day, she called police to report harassment, saying a man she was avoiding appeared at a gas station and tried to speak with her. This man had also been calling and texting her after she had blocked his primary number. She told police she feared for her life. She then took her car into the shop where mechanics found a GPS tracker on her car. It also alleged that John Paul was transferring their assets, including the deed to their home, to one of his sons, which he'd had with another woman. It was not Mica's biological son. While Mica was in the hospital earlier for a mental health crisis. Mica also contacted Myrtle Beach police on April 8th, claiming that John Paul had posted a nude photo of her to a Facebook group. The Myrtle Beach police are apparently run by good old boys still, because they told her that there was no way to really prove that he was the one that actually posted the photo, and that, quote, once a photo is sent, the person who the photos was sent to is now the owner of that photo, end quote. Which is not at all how it works. Not in the least how it works. Then a waitress came forward claiming John Paul had left her a 50% tip and his phone number recently and was texting her asking for bikini photos around the time of his wife's death. Classy, classy guy. I've also heard unconfirmed stories that are much, much worse than what's already been revealed, but no credible source has reported on those yet. But trust me, I think more is likely to come out in the coming weeks. There's a lot of smoke here. And this guy, John Paul looks really bad, right? Well, hang on a second, because on Tuesday, we got the official investigative report from the police, and it turns out it was, in fact, most likely a suicide after all. On the day of her death, Mica was seen on surveillance video purchasing a Sig Sauer handgun at a pawn shop, as well as a box of ammunition. Just prior to her death, Mica called 911 and told the dispatcher to track her phone because she was about to kill herself and she wanted someone to find her body and her vehicle. And they've released that 911 call. You can hear Mica's voice saying these things. Mica's body was found in the water at Lumber River State Park after police responded to that call. They also recovered the gun, and the serial number on the gun matched the exact gun that Mica had purchased from the pawn shop. Doesn't get any more clear than that, I think. So while this is not a murder, it's easy to see how John Paul's treatment may have led to the decisions Mica Miller made on that fateful day, which could lead to a civil suit of some kind by Mica's family. I'd almost guarantee that. He could also still be charged with revenge porn, among other things, should the Myrtle Beach police finally wake up and decide to do their jobs. All in all, this story once again showed the best and the very worst of the online sleuthing communities. The lesson to be learned here, I think, again, is do not rush to judgment when things seem like you've got the story, a lot of times the final answer is simpler, sadder. So don't rush to judgment. Wait for the evidence to come out. Now, believe it or not, there were some other stories in true crime this week other than Mica Miller. And there's one I want to talk to you about from Florida. Troubling new details emerged this week regarding a police shooting down there. 23-year-old Roger Fortson was shot and killed by police inside his apartment in Fort Walton Beach, Florida on May 3rd. After the shooting, the sheriff's office released a statement that said, quote, "Our deputy responded to a call of a disturbance in progress where he encountered an armed man. The deputy shot the man, who later succumbed to his injuries." Now, if there had not been witnesses, that's the only story we would have heard. Case closed, right? There was a witness in this case, though, because Fortson was FaceTiming with his girlfriend at the time of this incident, and she tells a very different story. According to the Associated Press, who spoke to the family's attorney, the woman claims they were FaceTiming when Fortson heard a knock at his door. He asked who was there and got no response. A few minutes later, there was a louder knock, at which time he looked through the peephole but couldn't see anybody outside. At that time, Fortson begins to fear for his own safety. He goes into another room, retrieves his gun, which was legally owned. As Fortson was walking back into his living room, sheriff's deputies burst through the door, saw that Fortson was armed, and shot him 6 times, killing him. Now, apparently, the police were called about a disturbance at the apartment. A neighbor claimed to have heard an argument inside an apartment, but Fortson's girlfriend says it wasn't them, that they did not have an argument, and it now appears, according to the family's attorney, that police may have gone to the wrong apartment and killed another black man who was doing nothing wrong here. Fortson was he was a special missions aviator with the 4th Special Operations Squadron. This guy's a military hero. He's the guy that would load the gunship's cannons during missions. The lawyer working with the family, by the way, is Ben Crump. You might remember that name. He's been involved with many other high-profile cases, such as the murders of Breonna Taylor and George Floyd. So expect to hear much more about this story in the weeks to come. Here's the final top story before we get to cold case updates, and that's where things really go off the rails this week, so you're going to want to stay tuned after the break. Police responded to a shooting at a Toronto mansion owned by rapper Drake in the early hours of Tuesday morning, according to the New York Times. The person who was shot is one of Drake's security guards. He was apparently shot by suspects who then fled in a vehicle, and those suspects remain at large. The guard was taken to a hospital where he is recovering. The shooting was captured by security cameras, and police are actively investigating that. Now, this shooting comes days after Kendrick Lamar released a diss track about Drake. Drake responded with a diss track of his own, and the two went back and forth all weekend, releasing 6 songs in 72 hours. On his song, Not Like Us, Lamar alleges that Drake and his buddies are, quote, certified pedophiles, end quote, and the song featured an aerial shot of Drake's home on a map for its cover art, which I guess, some would take as like a calling out for anybody that hates Drake. Maybe that's what led to the shooting. We don't know yet. Rumors have circulated for years about Drake, by the way, and his relationships with underage girls. Millie Bobby Brown, who you'll know as 11 from Stranger Things, is kind of wrapped up in this, which is bizarre. In 2018, Millie Bobby Brown revealed that Drake would text her advice about boys when she was 14, and that their friendship started when she was just 13. Drake has also caught flack for bringing a 17-year-old girl on stage at a concert and kissing her. When she told him how old she was in front of the audience, he said, quote, "I can't go to jail yet, man. 17. Why do you look like that? You thick. Look at this. I'm sorry, I did my best with that. End quote. Gross. Anyways, those are the top stories of this week, May 10th in 2024, which is crazy. Goes by so fast, right? I have much more after the break, though. You're going to want to hear a couple of these stories. There's one that comes with a massive trigger warning, but we just have to talk about it. Much more to come after the break. I'll be back in 2 and 2.
Please hang up and try again.
And we're back with Report to Murphy, starring Michael Keaton. A man was charged yesterday for more counts related to the murder of 22-year-old Augusta University nursing student Laken Riley, who never returned after going out for a run. Her body was discovered in a wooded area on the Athens campus on February 22nd, according to ABC News. A grand jury has indicted 26-year-old Jose Ibarra. He faces 10 new counts, including battery, kidnapping, and assault with intent to rape. He was also charged with a peeping Tom offense, as police alleged he spied on a different girl who was living in an apartment on campus that same day. This case has become quite toxic online since it was discovered that Ibarra unlawfully crossed into the United States in 2022. He had previously been arrested in New York City and charged with acting in a manner to injure a child less than 16 years old, but he was released by the NYPD, and he ends up killing Laken Riley. It is worth noting that trying to link undocumented immigrants, by the way, to a rise in crime in the States doesn't math, as the kids say. The math doesn't math. These crimes make up a fraction of 1% of crime in this country. Believe me, we're doing just fine killing ourselves. Plenty of stories every week. Court documents were unsealed this week in the death of Betty Bowman, who got sick and died from organ failure in August of last year, according to the New York Post. Her husband, Dr. Connor Bowman, was arrested last October and charged with her murder after her autopsy revealed she died of colchicine toxicity after ingesting medication she was not prescribed. And here's the related bit of info that the police thought was quite suspicious. Dr. Bowman is a poison specialist and had worked at a poison control center, so it didn't really take a rocket scientist to put 2 and 2 together. Anyways, documents were released this week that relate to Dr. Bowman's Bumble dating profile. A search warrant revealed that Bowman had been speaking to multiple women around the time of his wife's murder and was calling himself a widower before his wife had actually died. Word of advice, if you're willing to risk everything to murder your partner, divorce is a much safer proposition. We have a legal remedy for this. I think some people forget that. That would have been much easier in the long run, I think. So, there's that. In related news this week, 28-year-old Jarrett Davis was charged with murdering his girlfriend, 25-year-old Megan Bodyford, who was last seen on April 25th in South Carolina, according to Law and Crime. Before she went missing, Megan texted her good friend, quote, "If you don't hear from me in 30 minutes, he killed me. He has a gun," end quote. Megan's car was found torched, and human remains at the crime scene were later confirmed to be hers. It was also revealed that Davis had an active warrant out for his arrest for domestic violence at the time of Megan's murder. Megan leaves behind 3 children, ages 7 years old to 4 months. This is further confirmation that, as the kids say these days, she would have been better off being alone with a bear. Prosecutors in Boston. Okay, this is where things get a little sad for the next couple of stories, as if those stories weren't sad in their own right. But it's going to take it to another level that I try to avoid, but these are just, they're worth mentioning here. Prosecutors in Boston announced this week that they will not bring charges against the mother of 4 babies found frozen in a freezer, according to KKTV. The 4 bodies, 2 male and 2 female, were discovered in 2022 inside shoeboxes wrapped in foil, tucked inside a freezer, while a man was cleaning out his sister's apartment. It took the police a bit of work to track down who exactly was to blame. The coroner was unable to determine if the babies had been born alive. They were found with umbilical cords still attached and appeared to be between 37 and 40 weeks gestated. DNA eventually revealed that the mother of all 4 babies is 69-year-old Alexis Aldemir, who now lives in a healthcare facility and has diminished mental capacity. It appears the babies may have died sometime in the late 1970s or early 1980s, and it seems Aldemir kept the pregnancies secret. The father of those 4 babies died in 2011. Now, this is the sort of story that keeps me up at night because you never really know what happens behind closed doors and what your neighbors are really up to. So you can kind of, at first you get upset when you hear the police aren't bringing charges, but you kind of get it. These, she's beyond, it's not going to make any sense to her. Is there justice in this by locking up a woman who isn't really there anymore? It's just one of those crazy stories. Let's jump over to weird news. And it's weird this week. And I feel the need to offer a trigger warning here because this is even worse than the last story. I've never heard of anything quite this bizarre, and I don't really like what it says about humanity, but here it is. Marius Gustafsson called himself the eunuch maker, and now he'll spend the rest of his life behind bars, according to the BBC. Gustafsson is a 46-year-old man from Norway who was once a respected community member and postal worker who also chaired an LGBTQ charity. But some time ago, he began modifying his body in odd ways, and then he just went properly crazy after a divorce in 2016. Soon thereafter, he started up a new business in London where other people suffering from body integrity dysphoria would pay him to cut off their penis and stream it online. Court records show that Gustafsson earned over £300,000 from his website and amassed over 22,000 visitors, some of whom paid £100 for VIP access to new videos. In one such video, Gustafsson is seen cooking what appears to be human testicles, which he then eats. But no one can call Gustafsson a hypocrite, I guess, because he also paid another man to cut off his own penis. Now, it's not so much the testicle eating or the penis chopping off that really disturbs me. What disturbs me more is the 22,000 other people who paid to watch it. 22,000 people we don't know who were still out there. Let that sink in for a second. I think we all need a palate cleanser, no pun intended at this point. So here, real quick, here's a picture of a monkey cuddling with a kitten. Let's jump over to pop culture. There's this new documentary out on Apple TV. You got to watch it. It's called Hollywood Con Queen. They should have a better title. It's a great story. This new documentary details the story of Hardobind Taliramani. He goes by Harvey. Harvey's his nickname. Let's call him Harvey. Who scammed freelancers in the entertainment industry with fake projects and phone sex for more than a decade, conning people out of around $2 million before he was ultimately caught, thanks in part to work of a journalist for The Hollywood Reporter. Harvey sometimes impersonated Hollywood executives and sent freelancers out on fake assignments for shits and giggles, and other times he would pretend to be financiers and then solicit phone sex from industry professionals. So maybe this is, I think, maybe the craziest true crime documentary to come out this year. Definitely worth a watch. Hollywood Con Queen. Check it out on Apple. Now, the book that I want to recommend this week is called The Best Minds, A Story of Friendship, Madness, and the Tragedy of Good Intentions by Jonathan Rosen. Check out this write-up. This is one of those, there's some true crime stories that only one person in the world could ever write. This is one of those stories. These are the stories that I love to read. Here's the write-up. When the Rosens moved to New Rochelle in 1973, Jonathan Rosen, the author, and Michael Lodor became inseparable. Both children of college professors, the boys were fast friends and keen competitors. And when they both got into Yale University, they seemed to join the American meritocratic, I don't like that word, elite. Michael blazed through college. Hey, there's my voice. Michael blazed through college in just 3 years, graduating summa cum laude and landing a top-flight consulting job. But all wasn't as it seemed. One day, Jonathan received a call. Michael had suffered a serious psychotic break and was in a locked ward in a psychiatric hospital. Diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia, Michael was still battling delusions when he traded his halfway house for Yale Law School. Featured in the New York Times as a role model genius, he sold a memoir with film rights to Ron Howard. But then Michael, in the grip of an unshakable paranoid fantasy, stabbed his girlfriend Carrie to death and became a front-page story of an entirely different sort. Tender, funny, and harrowing by turns, The Best Minds is Jonathan Rosen's magnificent and heartbreaking account of good intentions and tragic outcomes whose significance echo widely. Quite a story. Check it out. The Best Minds. And that's the show for this week. I'm sorry if I've sent you into therapy because of some of the stories. We'll see what happens next week. People get up to crazy stuff. We don't even know what we're talking about next week. But anyways, that's the show. Go out, do something fun, try to forget about what you just heard. And in the words of the incomparable Murray Saul, we gotta get down, damn it. True Crime This Week is a Fearful Symmetry production. Photo and artwork are licensed through Shutterstock. If you like the cut of my jib, I have another podcast you might enjoy called The Philosophy of Crime, in which I attempt to solve the big questions behind our true crime obsession by looking to philosophy for answers. Thank you for listening. I'll see you next week. Sit, Brownie, sit. Good dog.